The city of Aegis was a monument to survival, a colossal, armored shell of polished plasteel rising from the toxic, rust-colored wastes. For Anya Rylan, Aegis was the entire world, and the Directorate who governed it were living gods. They had saved humanity from the Sundering, the great worldwide catastrophe 50 years prior, and now, the Directorate's historians, of which Anya was a diligent, if minor, cog, maintained the truth. The single, sacred, unchallenged truth. Her job, specifically, was to cross-reference data streams from the pre-Sundering archives with the official Chronicle of Salvation. It was monotonous, reassuring work, a silent devotional to the heroes who had preserved civilization. Anya's workspace was known as the Vault, a silent, climate-controlled cavern deep beneath the Directorate's central tower. The air hummed with the soft energy of servers, and the light was a perpetual, sterile white. For 5 years, she had input trillions of data points, ensuring that every historical record aligned perfectly with the narrative of the Directorate's heroic struggle and eventual victory. She was checking the logs for Operation Phoenix, the final, desperate act where the founders supposedly utilized a global energy dampener to halt the cascading environmental collapse. The official history was clear. Operation Phoenix saved millions, but cost the lives of the 5 founding scientists who piloted the dampener array. A tragic, but necessary sacrifice. The discrepancy was so small, so mathematically negligible, that any other archivist would have dismissed it as sensor drift. It appeared in the raw telemetry of the Phoenix array's power output. The historical text stated that the array's energy consumption peaked and then flatlined, consistent with the dampener activating and the founders dying in the subsequent surge. But in the deep, unredacted raw files, a few seconds after the flatline, there was a minute, impossible spike, a single, sharp, aggressive burst of energy. Not the dying gasp of a system overloading, but the focused, precise pulse of a weapon being fired. Anya leaned back from her holographic display, the cool metal of the terminal housing pressing against her spine. Her heart began a slow, heavy drumbeat against her ribs. She was trained to report anomalies immediately, but this wasn't an anomaly. It was a scar. A deliberate, surgical deviation from the expected outcome. It suggested the founders hadn't just died in the surge, they had been killed after successfully activating the array. But why would the Directorate, their heroic inheritors, edit the record to make their saviors seem like martyrs of a natural energy overload? The lie wasn't about the system failing. The lie was about who pulled the trigger. She spent the next 72 hours in a feverish, silent spiral, locked in the vault. She began cross-referencing everything related to the 5 founders. Their journals, their communication logs, their personal files, all of which were supposed to contain tearful farewells and heroic last messages. Instead, she found gaps. Massive, synchronized, digital silences that spanned months leading up to the Sundering. All 5 founders' personal comms had gone dark simultaneously, well before the official start of Operation Phoenix. This wasn't poor data retention. This was a mass deletion enforced by a single, powerful administrative key, a key that could only be held by the current director. The truth began to coalesce into a chilling, solid block of terror. The Sundering hadn't been a natural disaster that the Directorate heroically mitigated. The Sundering was Phase 1. It was a controlled demolition of the old world order, eliminating those who might oppose the new regime, the founders, and then creating an environment so terrifyingly dangerous that the survivors would beg to be ruled by a military-industrial authority, the Directorate. The Directorate didn't save humanity. They had terrorized it into submission. The biggest lie wasn't a historical misinterpretation. It was the entire foundation of their safe, clean, walled city. Every comforting lesson she'd ever learned, every song of praise sung to the Directorate, every clean meal and safe night's sleep within Aegis, suddenly tasted like ash. Her mentor, Commander Valen, a man whose stern, comforting demeanor defined her life, had always preached the necessity of absolute historical purity. She remembered his booming voice echoing in the vault. The truth is the wall that keeps the wastes out, Anya. Never compromise the wall. Now, she understood. Valen wasn't protecting the truth. He was protecting the lie that had built the wall. Fear was a cold, sharp blade pressing against her windpipe. She knew she couldn't report this. Reporting it meant instant, silent obliteration. She had found a hole in the sacred narrative, and the narrative would close around her like concrete. Her hands, usually steady on the controls, trembled as she executed a series of complex, untraceable file transfers, shunting the raw telemetry spike and the communication silence logs into a heavily encrypted, offline archival unit, a tiny, metallic cube disguised as a memory stick. This cube, usually reserved for personal music files, was now the only true historical artifact on the planet. Anya knew her days were numbered. The system was designed to self-correct, and eventually, the audit logs would flag her sustained, deep dive into the restricted founder files. She had perhaps 48 hours before the system automatically alerted the overseers. She had to get the truth out of the vault and out of Aegis. The problem was, she was an archivist. She knew databases and chronology, not escape routes or resistance movements. But as she gripped the metallic cube, feeling its cold weight, she realized her life had just been reduced to a singular purpose: finding the one person, outside the invincible walls of the Directorate, who might still believe in a different past. The one person who still remembered the world before the lie became history itself. This realization gave her a strange, terrifying calm. The fear was still there, but it was now secondary to the burning, righteous fury of a victim betrayed. She was no longer an archivist. She was a thief of sacred truth. The vault, once her sanctuary, was now a beautiful, elaborate prison built on a 50-year-old murder. The rhythmic hum of the servers now sounded like a countdown. The small, tracked utility vehicle, a squat cube of armored steel provided by Jor, tore through the red wastes, guided by the internal compass pointing north. Anya drove blind, relying on the suit's internal HUD to filter the blinding, corrosive dust storm that had kicked up after the Gate of Salvation closed. The chaos she had unleashed in Aegis was still screaming in the silence of the wastes, now filtered through the ultra-low frequency ULF receiver. It was no longer a solitary Morse code beep. It was a fragmented, buzzing tapestry of signals. She was picking up raw, panicked Directorate communications, orders countermanded, sectors demanding reinforcement, and the terrifying, constant loop of Valen's voice, now warped by static, demanding her immediate location. But she also heard something new, something that made the painful fatigue recede. Faint, civilian broadcasts from the peripheral settlements, the seedlings outside Aegis, repeating Dr. Kale's message, interspersing his final plea with desperate questions and raw, powerful oaths of defiance. The truth had found fertile ground, and the harvest was beginning. Anya reached the wreckage of the Argus moments before the last of her suit's auxiliary power failed. The vehicle slid to a halt at the base of the massive, broken tail fin. She scrambled out, the suit feeling like a dead weight, and headed for the hidden cargo hatch. It was open. She descended the cramped, dark shaft into the bunker, collapsing onto the hard-packed earth floor, peeling off her helmet. The air inside was warm and clean, smelling faintly of ozone and old, preserved paper. A man was waiting. He wasn't the broken-down hermit she had pictured, nor was he a rogue Directorate soldier. He was lean, middle-aged, with the worn hands of an engineer and the deeply observant eyes of an academic. He wore simple, durable clothes, and his presence exuded an unnerving, patient calm. He had the same knowing, tired look in his eyes that she had seen on the screens, reflected from Dr. Kale's face. "Anya Rylan," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of purpose. "You did it. You pushed the final file through. I am Elias Vaughn, the Watcher." Anya struggled to her feet, leaning against the cold metal bulkhead. Valen, he knew. He was part of it right from the start. He said the founders were weak idealists. Elias nodded, his gaze distant. Silas Vane, the director, used men like Valen. Hard men who believed the old world's freedom led to the sundering. Valen believes order is worth any price, including murder. He was Vane's executioner, not just his historian. Elias walked over to a bank of equipment humming softly in the corner, a modified, high-gain ULF receiver and recording station. Listen. He cranked a dial, and the bunker was filled with the cacophony of the outside world. One strong signal stood out, emanating from a place Anya knew only as a footnote in the Directorate's archives. Settlement 7. They're not just listening, Anya. They're transmitting. They're telling everyone else to wake up. For 50 years, the Directorate controlled the wastes by isolating us, making us believe we were alone. Now, the seedlings know they are an entire garden. Elias explained his history. He was a junior environmental engineer, mentored by Dr. Kale, and the only person who knew the fail-safe plans the true founders had created before Vane seized control of the Phoenix Array. He was meant to be eliminated with the rest, but he used a maintenance shortcut and a fabricated death certificate to escape during the confusion of the initial sundering. He found the Argus, a wreck that Vane considered too deep and too inconsequential to ever sweep, and turned it into his solitary observation post. His role had been simple: keep Kale's recording safe, and watch for the moment Aegis produced someone capable of carrying the truth out. I knew it would take someone inside the machine, Anya. Someone with the access and the clean slate of belief. You were the only one. The weight of his expectation felt heavier than the environmental suit. What now? Anya asked, rubbing the raw skin of her palm. The Directorate won't just let the seedlings talk. Valen will mobilize the tactical core. He'll crush the Aegis uprising and then sterilize the waste settlements to ensure the lie is buried again. Elias turned, his expression hardening into a fierce resolve that mirrored Anya's own. Then we give them a reason not to. The truth you broadcast was the spark. Now we need fuel. The founders, the 5 who were murdered, had a counter-protocol for Vane's corruption of the Phoenix Array. A complete, uncorrupted data set of the array's true design, detailing how to stabilize the wastes, not just maintain them. They hid the master files in a place only Kale's closest circle knew. A forgotten pre-sundering research vault near the old launch site, the Cradle of Phoenix. He pulled out a heavily folded, brittle map. It was a pre-sundering geographical survey, marking a location far beyond even the Argus. The Directorate only maintains the lie. They don't dare disturb the original sites. They fear relics of the past. If we get those files, Anya, we don't just prove the past was a lie, we offer a tangible, scientific future that Vane and the Directorate actively suppressed. We offer the means to genuinely reverse the sundering and end the wastes. Anya looked at the map, then back at Elias. The stakes had risen from exposing a historical crime to orchestrating a global scientific and political revolution. The archivist in her was terrified, but the revolutionary was exhilarated. The Directorate knows I headed north. They'll be sweeping this area soon. We have to move now. We have to beat Valen to the cradle. She clipped the useless memory cube containing the truth onto her belt, now a talisman of rebellion. Elias nodded. The Watcher and the Archivist, united by a 50-year-old murder and armed with only the truth and a brittle map, prepared to move deeper into the toxic wasteland, not running from the Directorate, but actively seeking the scientific weapon that could finally dismantle the biggest lie humanity had ever believed. Their new purpose was absolute: turn the echoes of the sundering into a definitive, unstoppable final chorus. The small, armored vehicle, a low-slung, heavily treaded utility runner, left the shadow of the Argus wreckage moments before the Directorate patrol scanners would have caught them. Elias Vaughn navigated by the brittle, pre-sundering map, its faded markings contradicting the Directorate's sanitized modern charts. Anya drove, the controls feeling responsive and deadly beneath her hands. The atmosphere inside the cabin was a pressurized mix of stale air and taut silence, broken only by the crackle of the ULF receiver, which was now a constant, chaotic symphony of rebellion. The seedlings, the outlying settlements, were not just talking. They were forming decentralized communication channels, coordinating actions, and broadcasting Dr. Kale's recording in a furious loop that drowned out the Directorate's jamming attempts. They're mobilizing a full tactical sweep, Anya, Elias murmured, adjusting the ULF filter. Valen knows the Argus was the leak point. He's closing the perimeter, but his resources are stretched thin, containing the uprisings inside Aegis. He's scrambling. He won't scramble for long, Anya replied, her eyes fixed on the hazy red horizon. She pushed the vehicle faster, ignoring the punishing jolts as they traversed the scarred, unstable terrain. Valen prioritizes the lie above all else. He'll leave a skeleton crew to manage the city and hunt us with everything else. He knows those Phoenix protocols are the only thing that can permanently end his order. Elias turned, his demeanor calm despite the imminent danger. Tell me about Valen, Anya. You were close to him. What does he value more than order? Nothing, she said flatly. That's the core of it. He sees freedom as weakness, democracy as the recipe for the next sundering. He genuinely believes he's the necessary villain. He's predictable only in his devotion to absolute control. But he's also arrogant. He believes he's smarter than the Founders. He destroyed their work, but he may not have bothered to destroy the Cradle itself. The Cradle of Phoenix was not a myth. It was a ghost of true history. The map led them 30 kilometers north of the Argus, toward a heavily localized tectonic fault line that the Directorate's official charts labeled simply as Unstable Zone, Avoid. As they approached, the wastes began to change. The ubiquitous red dust was replaced by fields of jagged, obsidian-like rock, the scars of intense, localized heat. The air grew thicker, heavier, hinting at geological activity. Finally, the Cradle materialized through the shimmering heat haze, a vast, circular depression in the earth, within which sat a complex of colossal, heavily armored structures. It looked like a silent, dead spider clinging to the earth, the original pre-sundering launch and research facility, abandoned but perfectly preserved by its unique, radiation-shielded location. Its primary entrance, a massive, blast-proof vault door built into the cliff face, was sealed shut, the mechanisms visibly corroded by 50 years of toxic air. This is it, Elias breathed. The Cradle. They never dared touch it. Too deep, too close to the original power source. Too many ghosts for Vane's taste. He pointed to a small, almost invisible access port near the top of the main vault door. Kale built that. It's an emergency personnel hatch, designed for only one function: to bypass the main security and retrieve the master data core in case of a hostile takeover. It uses a very old, mechanical tumbler system, no digital signature, no firewall to breach. Anya quickly maneuvered the utility vehicle to the base of the door. Elias grabbed a heavy, antique toolkit from the back. I know the rotation sequence. We have maybe 15 minutes to get inside, pull the drive, and leave before the first tactical patrol arrives. The moment we use the tumbler, it sends out a magnetic spike Valen can track. They had just reached the top of the vehicle, with Elias preparing to climb the sheer face to the access port, when the ULF receiver in the cabin let out a screech of static, overwhelming the rebellious murmurs of the seedlings. It wasn't just a signal, it was a targeted, high-frequency shriek that cut through the ULF bands. They're here, Elias said, his voice clipped. That's a Directorate jamming probe. A scout. Valen isn't far behind. Anya scanned the horizon. Nothing but red dust. But she knew the speed of their advanced scouts. He'll be here in 5 minutes. We need a distraction. Elias didn't argue. He looked at the utility vehicle, then at the vast, jagged rock formations around them, remnants of the Sundering's initial localized blast. I need you on the hatch, Anya. You have the reflexes. I'll delay them. He pulled out a specialized sensor disruptor, a small, humming device that looked like a brass ornament. This won't stop them, but it will blind their long-range scanners. They'll have to come in blind on the ground. Anya grabbed the tumbler tool from him. 5 minutes. If I'm not down in 5 minutes, assume I've been compromised and you leave. No, Elias said, meeting her gaze with unflinching intensity. We either get the truth out together, or we both become part of the wastes. That's the code of the Watcher. She nodded, the simple gravity of his dedication strengthening her resolve. She scaled the vehicle, then began the careful, agonizing climb up the corroded metal face toward the hatch, the tumbler tool cold and heavy in her hand. Below her, Elias activated the disruptor, the air around him shimmering faintly. He then ran toward the nearest ridge of sharp, black rock, disappearing into the dust storm just as the unmistakable, guttural roar of high-speed Directorate armor vehicles began to cut through the oppressive static of the jamming probe. The race was now measured in heartbeats, and Anya, perched precariously on the cradle's sealed face, began to insert the ancient tumbler tool, praying the mechanical lock would hold the key to ending the longest lie in human history. Anya, clinging to the corroded face of the cradle's massive vault door, moved with the hyper-focused precision of a surgeon under fire. The tumbler tool, a relic of pre-sundering mechanics, was frustratingly stiff. The ancient lock mechanism, deep within the access port, responded with grating, metallic complaints to her attempts to find the correct alignment. Every millimeter of rotation was a struggle, and she had to rely entirely on the subtle feedback through the tool, the scrape of brass against iron, the faint thunk of a pin seating correctly. She had to tune out the wind, the dust, and the mounting pressure in her chest. One turn, Rylan. 60 degrees counterclockwise to the first stop. If you over-rotate, the whole thing seizes for 20 minutes. Elias's instruction, delivered moments earlier, echoed in her mind. Her gloved hands, clumsy and thick, fought for the delicacy required. The growing roar of the Directorate's vehicles was no longer distant. It was a physical sound, vibrating through the metal structure she was hanging onto. The sound was immediately followed by a high-pitched, retaliatory shriek of static as the scout vehicle's proximity sensors screamed in confusion, blinded by Elias's crude disruptor. Then, from the ridge of black, jagged rock where Elias had vanished, there was a sudden, blinding flash of orange light, quickly choked by the swirling red dust. A muffled crump followed, the sound of a small, precisely placed explosive charge. The Directorate scout, now forced to rely on visual and auditory confirmation, momentarily hesitated. The explosion had done little structural damage, but it was enough to confirm a target. Elias Vaughn. Go for the distraction, Elias, Anya whispered, tasting bile in her mouth. She used the momentary noise to force the tumbler past a sticking point. Click. The first lock pin seated. She moved to the second rotation, 90 degrees clockwise. The process was agonizingly slow, her muscles burning from the sustained tension of hanging onto the slippery metal. Below, the utility vehicle's external camera, linked to her suit HUD, showed the first tactical vehicle, a low-profile Directorate Harrier, skidding around the depression's edge, its heavy treads churning the obsidian rock. It was fast, efficient, and heading straight for the ridge where Elias was hiding. The race was over. The confrontation had begun. Click. The second pin locked home. Only one more to go. The third sequence was the longest and most complex, 120 degrees counterclockwise, then a quick, precise half-turn back. She held her breath, ignoring the panicked flicker in her peripheral vision as the Harrier opened fire on Elias's position, its energy weapon stitching blinding green lines across the black ridge. Click. Slee-eyed. The tumbler scraped the end of the rotation, and the mechanism hesitated. Anya forced herself to pause, her heart hammering against the metal casing of the lock. If she pushed too hard, she would break the tool and fail forever. She applied the reverse pressure, the quick half-turn, a gesture of faith in Kale's old design, and then, finally, triumphantly, Kale UNK. The magnetic spike hit instantly, a brief, powerful electromagnetic pulse that caused her HUD to fizzle and the nearby tactical vehicle to stutter, confirming the lock had been breached. The small access port hissed, and the circular hatch clunked inward. Anya didn't waste a second. She unclipped her harness, shoved the heavy tumbler tool into the hatchway, and squeezed through the tight opening, pulling her legs in just as the first massive armored shadow fell over the cradle's vault door. She fell 5 feet into the utter, ancient darkness of the cradle. The air was stale, cold, and silent, a profound, sensory deprivation after the raging storm outside. She quickly located the hatch closure lever and sealed the door with a loud, ringing thwack. The sounds of the wastes, the scream of the Harrier's brakes, the shout of its pilot, and the continued, sporadic energy fire were instantly muffled, receding to a dull thrumming. She activated the helmet light. The interior of the cradle was a narrow, tiled corridor, perfectly preserved. The walls were lined with obsolete cooling pipes and data conduits, leading inward toward the heart of the facility. And then she heard it. Not the noise of the wastes, but a voice, amplified and terrifyingly close, echoing down the face of the vault door, directly outside her recently sealed hatch. Elias Vaughn, the game is over. You led the archivist directly to the cradle. You are pathetic, you idealistic fool. It was Valen. He had arrived. The scout had confirmed their location and their purpose. Anya held still, pressing herself against the cold, tiled wall, the Phoenix protocols, the future of the world, just ahead in the darkness. She knew Valen would not be deterred by a sealed hatch. He would simply find the heavy gear to blast the main vault open. She had maybe 10 minutes, tops, before Valen tore the front door off the cradle. She had won the physical battle for the lock, but the race for the data core was just beginning, and she had to navigate a 50-year-old, booby-trapped facility entirely alone. The deep, grinding protest of the thermal drill gnawing at the main vault door was Anya's new, terrifying metronome. Trapped within the dark, suffocating silence of the cradle, the sound was muffled but constant, a relentless reminder that Commander Valen was not minutes, but moments away from ripping the entrance to her sanctuary wide open. Anya had maybe 8 minutes left, enough time for Valen's heavy gear to penetrate the thick, pre-sundering steel. She activated her suit's navigation assist, illuminating the copper numbering system etched into the walls. 100, 101, 102. She desperately needed to reach Section 700, the experimental containment core, where the true Phoenix protocols lay hidden. She moved quickly down the tiled corridor, the beam of her helmet light cutting through the profound, ancient darkness. The air was cold, smelling faintly of inert gas and the metallic tang of forgotten science. This facility was a ghost, perfectly preserved but hostile. She turned a corner and spotted the junction leading to a maintenance bypass, a clear shortcut. But the access panel was guarded, not by a physical lock, but by a recessed, brass plate inscribed with a fragmented line of poetry, the necessity of seeing through the chaos to the final form. Anya recognized it immediately as the signature of Dr. Kale, one of the murdered founders, who integrated abstract thought into his security designs. This wasn't a directorate trap, solved by force. It was a scientist's deterrent, designed to stymie brute force and reward archival knowledge. As she reached for the lever, a thin, nearly invisible energy field sliced across the corridor ahead, hissing faintly, a high-voltage deterrent designed to stop, not kill, forcing the intruder to pause and think. She realized Valen would waste precious minutes here, trying to blast the force field, but she knew Kale's mind. She recalled a forgotten footnote in Kale's architectural schematics. He had coded his most critical data rooms based on the Fibonacci sequence, the mathematical progression of order out of chaos. The visible numbers on the wall were 1, 0, 1, 2. The next numbers in the sequence would be 3, 5, 8. Anya ran her gloved finger over the brass plate, pressing the recessed segments corresponding to the digits 3, 5, and 8. Click, click, click. The energy field immediately winked out, and the maintenance bypass door hissed open, granting her passage into a much tighter, darker crawlspace, a maze of obsolete steam pipes that cut her travel time by half, but also slowed her movement to a painful, desperate scramble. The sound of the drill outside increased in pitch, the whine turning into a screech. Valen was nearing the breach. She emerged into the main research complex, a vast, cylindrical chamber spanning multiple levels, ringed by metal catwalks. The entire complex shuddered violently as the drill finally broke through the outer layer of the main vault door. A mechanical whine began from the walls around her. Ancient, deactivated sentry drones, clumsy, observation-only security units, were powering up, their single, red ocular sensors blinking to life. They were too slow to stop her, but their proximity sensors would instantly broadcast her location to Valen's comms, regardless of Elias's attempts at jamming. She had to neutralize them now. She spotted the central conduit switch, a heavy, shielded lever on the wall. Relying on her memory of the facility's original energy logs, she diverted auxiliary power to the conduit. The founders had built a magnetic failsafe to fry low-grade, infiltrating technology without affecting the heavily hardened data core. She pulled the lever. The chamber erupted in a blinding, purple surge of electricity. The clumsy drones immediately sputtered and died, their red eyes extinguishing as acrid smoke curled from their chassis. The magnetic pulse was a powerful, violent declaration that Anya had seized control of the facility's defenses. She sprinted up the ramp to Section 700. It was a single, heavily shielded room, silent and utterly dark. She forced the manual door open and stepped into the data core chamber. It was small, circular, and utterly dominated by a central console, a single, gleaming black pedestal. On the pedestal sat a crystal lattice drive, pulsing with a faint, steady light, the silent core, holding the entirety of the True Phoenix protocols.